friends, today I'm going to show you how to knit a broken rib stitch Christmas stocking with the faux fur cuff. So let's talk about what you're going to need first. You're going to need the US 19 circular needle, and those are 40-inch needles. Sirdar Alpine, and that's the color Polar, Cascade Magnum, and just a stitch marker, which is just a piece of thread. Also, you're going to want the pattern, which you can get in the link below. To start, we're going to cast on 22 stitches. And I use the long tail method for cast on, but you can use whatever method you'd like. All right, then you're going to split the 22 stitches into two groups of 11. And there's no magic reason that they have to be even. I'm just kind of the Tidy Mind Club. But you're going to split your your 22 stitches between the two needles with your working yarn in back. And make sure you don't catch that cast on tail. If you've never used the magic loop, this is how I use to knit small tubes like socks and stockings. I'm having a problem talking today. Anyway, we're just going to knit as usual, and we're just doing a stocking stitch all the way around. We're just going to be knitting because we're only working on the one side. I love the Sirdar Alpine. I'd be lying if I said that it might just be a little more difficult than your average yarn. You know, if you drop a stitch, you're just not going to find it. You're going to just need to rip it out and start all over again. It's really thin underneath all that fur. So it gets a little tight on these chunky needles. But you're only doing it for about 9 to 10 rows, and so it's not that long that you're working with it. But I do love the end result of the fur. It's really soft. It's not scratchy like a lot of faux furs. So anyway, after you've done that first set of 11, bring your stitches up to the other needle and continue knitting. And it's really just the process of doing the 11, sliding your stitches around, turning it around, doing the other 11. This first row is going to be your hardest row. Once the stitches will loosen up a little from here on out. Okay, so turn your work and then bring the stitches from the first time you knit, those first 11, back to the top of their needle and knit them. And that's really just the process of the magic loop. You're just gonna slide up the 11 or however many you need to knit to their working needle. Slide the ones you're not gonna knit off of the needle. And I forgot to put my stitch marker. Put your stitch marker at the beginning. So I've got the 11 I'm working on now, and I'm just going to continue in stocking stitch. I will say too, make sure you count your stitches. Each time you should have 11 or however many you cast on. Total of 22, but 11 on each stitch, on each needle. because this yarn can kind of get, I'm not exactly sure how it happens, but the cord, that clear cord at the end of the needle can kind of get caught under the yarn and it'll look like you have another stitch on there. It happens to me every time. So just make sure you're always working on, that you always have the requisite number of stitches, in this case 11 on each needle. If you've never worked with a magic loop or magic circle before, one of my tips is to, when you start a new row, just snug up your yarn so that you don't get a gap between the two sides. Wait a minute here. This music is fun and all, but don't you think we need Christmas music since we're knitting Christmas stockings? Hold on a second. Let me fix that. Oh, that's much better. So here's where, when I'm bringing this yarn over the first time, make sure that it's good and snug so that I don't get a gap between those two sides. So that's the basic of the magic loop, magic circle, and you're just going to continue working that way to build the cuff of your stocking. Nine rows should give you about 4.5 inches, which is what I've got here, depending on how you measure with all that fur. You can make your cuff as long or short as you want, but I stopped at about 4.5 inches. This is the Cascade Magnum, and I did a quick little ball roll there. And now, once again, I'm just making sure that I have my 11 stitches on each side. And we're going to just keep doing what we have been doing, but we are going to now be working in a broken rib stitch and with the Magnum, the Cascade Magnum. So I just switched the yarn to the Cascade Magnum. And if you've not worked the broken rib before, it just alternates rows between a knit row and then a knit purl row, a rib stitch row with the broken rib. So we're on the knit row, and this is where your stitch marker is going to be invaluable so that you could tell when to switch from your solid knit to your knit purl. Okay, so we're at the end of the knit row. And now we're going to knit purl, knit purl, knit purl for the rest of this row. And snug that up. This stocking truly is a very quick knit. You could easily, well, unless you were doing a whole bunch of other things, but sit down and knit one up in a day. Especially this chunky yarn just really makes it go quickly. One of the tips that I have found is that I know with my 11 stitches on each side, I'm going to be ending. So if I start with a knit, I'm going to end with a knit. And so that I know the second set of 11 is going to start with a purl. The other thing is, let's talk about yarn placement. To purl, you're going to want that yarn to be underneath your needle. So pull that in, snug that up, and knit that purl. When you go back around and you're going to be knitting, you're going to want the yarn on top of your needle. So we finished that knit purl row. Now we're going to be knitting all stitches on this row. Once again, my stitch marker keeps flipping off. You're going to want the yarn on top of your working needle, coming over top of it. After I knit that first stitch right there, I kind of pulled the yarn a little tight as I was going into the second stitch. And that's how I, just keep those two sides snug. You're going to continue in this broken rib stitch for 24 rows. Every odd row you're going to knit the stitches, and every even row you're going to do your rib stitch, knit, purl, knit, purl. Since you are working in the round, all of these 24 rows will only be worked on the right side. So you're never going to have to worry about a back side. We will be switching that, but for these 24 rows, you will only be working the front side. One thing, your 24th row does need to be a rib stitch row, a knit, purl row. That is imperative. You can make this stocking longer if you want, but you have to end on a knit, purl row for the rest of the pattern to fall into place. Okay, so here we are, we're working on the 24th row. And once again, so you have to make sure that this is a knit, purl row. Snug that up. I'm just going to speed on through this since you're pros at broken rib stitch by now. Okay, we are now going to separate the 22 stitches so that we have 13 stitches on the front needle and 9 stitches on the back needle. And for the needle that has the 13, that front needle, make sure that the first stitch is going to be a knit stitch. So that column will never have a purl stitch in it. And that's, once again, important for you to stay in pattern. You're going to work these 13 stitches for the heel and leave the other 9 untouched for the time being. And up until this point, we worked only on the front side of the fabric for the first 24 rows. Now we're going to be working front and back for these 13 stitches that are on this front needle. Okay. And whatever you do, just stay in pattern. These directions were written, specifically if you have 24 rows, and if you start your first row as a knit row on these 13, if you somehow change that, just make sure you stay in pattern. Okay, so I am going to be doing, this is the reverse of the knit, purl. So it was purl, knit, and you can check that by turning your work over and make sure that it's lining up. You should always have a column with just knits. Every other stitch will be a knit. And then in between that should be the broken, rib, the purl and the knit. So from time to time, just turn over, when you're working on this purl side, on the back side, turn over and check your work to make sure you're staying in pattern. So we started with 13 stitches on this first needle, on the front needle, and we're going to end these 2 rows. We're still going to have 13 stitches. And definitely take some time to count them so you know you're not going awry. But you can see I have that column of knits. And as long as I always have a column of knits, I know I'm good. Okay, so now we are going to have the first decrease row. So we're going to slip 1 knitwise, and we're going to slip and then knit. Then we're going to work the next 7 in pattern. And once again, don't forget, if you want the printable version of this pattern, click the little eye in the upper right hand corner and go to the blog and you can download the free pattern. So then we're going to knit 2 together and knit again. And once again, I'm counting, so I should have 11 stitches. And then I'm just going to work these in the rib stitch. I'm going to slip 1, purl, and then knit, and I'm going to double check to make sure that I'm staying on pattern. I should still have 11. Now I'm going to decrease again. So I'm going to slip 1, slip, knit the next 2. And then this is the knit row, so I'm going to stay in the knit pattern. And then I'm going to knit these 2 together. Knit the last one and turn. Make sure I have 9. I'm going to slip this first one purlwise. And then I'm going to, starting with a knit purl all these. And once again, I'm going to check the back to make sure I'm staying in pattern. Okay, double check that I've got my 9. We'll be decreasing again down to 7. So slip 1, slip set, knit. Knit these 3. Knit the 2 together, and knit that last one. Down to 7, turn around, and I'm just gonna slip purlwise the first one, and then work this in the rib pattern, which is gonna start with a purl. Check my work, make sure I'm in pattern. All right. Okay, now I'm down to 5 stitches. I'm going to work the back 5 in the rib. Work this row, we're going to decrease the number of stitches down to 3. Okay, so using that needle with the 3 stitches, that front needle, I'm going to pick up 5 stitches, the 5 stitches closest to the needle with the 3 stitches on it. So it's the first one, second one, third one, fourth, fifth. Then I'm going to knit the 9 from that back needle that we've just kind of ignored for the last couple minutes. And you know it's 4 o'clock because my little friend has popped up. She can hide all day, but come 4 o'clock, she's ready to start snuggling in preparation for 5 o'clock dinner. So we're just knitting these, and remember we ended those on a knit purl row on the broken rib, on the rib. So if we following along specifically, the next row for those 9 should be a knit row. And then to pick up these 5, pick up the 5 closest to the, what am I trying to say, where you ended your 3. So you want them closest to that 3, so count backwards. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She'll just keep walking back and forth until I hold her, which I can't do right now. So there's the 5. So you are now back around. Oh, I got a little tight. You have brought you've got a tube again. So you're going to work 11 more rows, and you're going to start, you're going to start with a purl, because see where that center stitch, that needs to always stay a knit. So we're going to start with a purl. If you remember when we came back around, we were knitting, so now we're doing the knit purl row. You can split up these 22 stitches however you want for these next 11 rows. Okay, so I know I'm starting with a purl here because I'm staying in pattern. When you're knitting, your yarn always has to come over your top. Alright, so then we're on a knit row. And you're just going to continue as you did for the rest of the body for a total of 11 rows. And once again, you'll be working in the round again, so the right side of the stocking should always be facing you. When you get to the 11th row, stop when you have 4 stitches left before the stitch marker. Keep the 11 stitches, starting with the 4 you haven't worked, on the front needle and the remaining 11 on the back needle. Ensure that that center stitch of the heel, which should be a column of knits, is the center of the needle facing you. So that column of knits right there is the heel. Make sure that that's always in the center. That's the center of the heel. So make sure that that center of the heel is always in the center of your needles. So we're going to be decreasing again, and there's no way we're going to be able to stay fully in pattern for all the stitches. And that's okay. What is important is that you keep the center stitches in pattern. So I've got 11 on each stitch. I'm going to worry about, I'm just going to worry about for the time being like the center 5 on each one, and then after that I'll worry about the center 3. I'm going to work 2 in pattern, work 2 together, and then I'm going to stay in pattern for the next 3. Then I'm going to either slip knit or slip purl, depending on what I need. In this case, I'm going to be doing a slip knit. Then I'm going to work these 2 in pattern, because I want to, which in this case is a knit purl, since I'm on the rib row. Okay, so on this second needle, I'm going to work 2 in pattern. And then I'm going to work 2 together. And once again, I kind of base it on what my center stitch is. So there's a purl, knit, purl. So I'm going to purl these together. Because I'm worrying about those center, in this case, 5 stitches, and then after another row, then I'm only going to worry about the center 3 stitches, because I'm going to be combining the outer edges. And there's no absolute right way to decrease when you're trying to stay in pattern. My suggestion is to just do what you think looks best. As long as you keep those center 3 stitches in pattern, it's really not going to make much of a difference. It's a little game to me, so I try to figure out the best way to stay in pattern for the longest. Bearing in mind that after this row, those stitches are going to get combined. so they're not gonna show. All right, so I have 9 stitches on each needle. For this row then, I'm just going to be staying in pattern. I'm not decreasing, I'm just going to be staying in pattern. And bearing in mind though that it is going to be the first 3 stitches are kind of one pattern, and then after I get to the other side of the row marker, they're the other pattern. So in this case it was, I was still doing the rib stitch, and then the other side of the stitch marker I was doing knit. So I'm knitting all these. Again, you're going to work this row in pattern. You won't be decreasing this row either. All right, so then I'm back to this row now. I'm going to decrease again, staying in pattern. So these first 3 stitches are kind of in the knit, are still part of that knit row. So I'm going to knit the first one, but then I'm going to look at my center stitch, which is a knit, and that's going to be a purl, so this is going to be a knit. And that's kind of my way of trying to stay in pattern as I'm decreasing. I just see what is going to make the most sense based on that center stitch. So on this back needle, we're going to do another decrease. Once again, basing it on that center stitch. Because my center stitch is a purl, I'm going to be purling the 2 together. For the decrease. And then I'm going to be doing another slip purl on this end. And you should be down to 7 stitches now on each needle. I'm going to work this needle, the front and back needle, just staying in pattern, no decreasing right now. Remember, the pattern will be different on either side of that row marker. Work this row in pattern without any decrease. I keep saying row, this needle, I guess is a better way of saying it. Work this needle in pattern without any decrease. Even though technically those stitches on the other side of that stitch marker are the different row, you know, they're all getting blended in right now. So that row marker is handy, but I'm not gonna live and die by it. I'm gonna kind of just do what makes sense for the pattern visually. So once again, I have a purl there, knit. So this first one's gonna be a knit. And I'm going to purl 2 together. And now I'm going to slip purl. So in order to do a slip purl, you slip 2 knitwise, and then you purl. Transfer them to the other needle, and then purl them. And the reason I did that is just based on trying to keep that center purl, keep the stitches on either side of it to make sense. So this is another decrease row, and I'm looking at what I need to do here. So to make sense, I'm going to purl this first stitch, knit the 2 together, so that that center stitch is a purl, which it needs to be, following the pattern. And I'll slip knit the last 2. And then purl. And we're just going to work these 5 in pattern, 5 on each needle. There you go. You are this close to being done with your stocking. We're going to get some wire and learn how to do the Kitchener stitch to tie that toe off. Okay, so you've got your 5 stitches on each needle, all right, and you need a wire. And this, I couldn't find a good piece of wire. This is like soldering wire. I couldn't find normal wire, but whatever, it worked. In the past, I've used more wiry wire and I had to bend down the tips. I did not need to do this for this soldering wire, or I don't even know what it's called, but I think it was for when you're soldering, I don't know what it's called. So you've got your 5 on each needle, your back and your front. On the front needle, and these first 2 steps are only the setup steps. On the front, go through the first stitch as if to purl, from the front to the back, okay? But don't pull your stitch off the needle, just leave it on there. Okay, on the needle in the back, go in as if to knit from front to back. And don't take it off the needle. All right, so those are your 2 setup stitches. The rest of these are just then repeated. So then back to your front needle, you go through the first stitch as if to knit, and then you do take it off the needle. Just slide that off. Make sure you don't get the back one off. Still on the front needle, go through the next stitch as if to purl, but don't take it off the needle, all right? So then on the back needle, go through the first stitch as if to purl, and do take it off the needle. And then still on the back needle, go through the next stitch as if to knit, but don't take it off the needle. Go back to the front as if to knit, from front to back, take that one off the needle, go to the second one as if to purl, leave it on the needle, go to the back, purl, take it off, and in the back, knit and keep it on. In the front, knit, take it off, purl, leave it on. You can see the pattern here. Purl, take it off, knit, leave it on, knit, take it off, purl, and here's where maybe I should have bent my tips over. Purl, leave it on, purl, take it off, and then these last 2 stitches you're just gonna knit the front one off and then purl the back one off. Ta-da! You are done. Now, I'm just going to, I'll use a crochet hook and weave those in, and I'm going to tie a good knot at the bottom just to be sure, because these stockings get loaded up kind of heavy. But then I'll just weave in the tail with a crochet hook and you'll never see it. So then I had to figure out a way to hang my stocking, and I'll be honest with you, that was a challenge for me. I'm not sure why. What I ended up doing was braiding some of the yarn, and the finished braid ended up to be about 8 inches, and you can see in this image that the braid is more at one end. My tip would be make your braid more in the middle. And then I found the center, like where the heel is, all right, and I followed that that column, I guess, all the way up to the very top. And because I wanted to make sure that my hanger was in the middle of, where the heel was. So you can see when I'm just going to tuck the braid in here and just pulled it through in 2 places. They're probably about 1 inch apart. So I'm going to undo just so that I have, like I said, an equal amount of unbraided, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to braid all of those 6 pieces together. I don't know about you, but my stockings tend to get pretty heavy, and so I just wanted to make sure I give this little hook plenty of stability in the stocking. I don't want it to rip or fall out. So I kind of, I'm hitting it in a couple different ways. I'm braiding it to give it some strength. I'm going to weave that braid in, and you won't see this because it's hidden by the cuff. And this is just thicker than, kind of normal sewing thread, just for an added stability. And then I'm just going to literally add a few stitches to just make sure that it is good and snug in there. And I'm actually going to purposely catch the cuff to keep it in place. And I'm going to go around and sew the cuff to the body of the stocking in 3 other places too. So in 4 places, it'll just be pinned down so that the cuff stays in place. And just for aesthetics, I'm just going to weave in those last little tails. And I feel pretty good that this hanger will be stable for the stocking. I'll just take my needle and, pin it in 3 other places around the stocking just to keep that cuff down. But there you go. There's your Christmas stocking. Really easy to make. You can whip out a whole bunch of them for all the elves in your world. And I hope this was helpful to you. If you want to get the printed pattern, pop over and click the I in the upper right-hand corner. And that'll take you to the blog post, and you can download the pattern for free. If you want to see more videos from Nurse and Nestle, click the little nest in the bottom right-hand corner. I hope you have a great day. Thanks so much.